The diplomatic chamber aboard the massive Kethtar flagship hummed with tension as representatives from 12 different species sat around the crystalline conference table. At the head sat General Vexthan, his forearms folded across his chitinous chest, mandibles clicking with barely contained fury. His compound eyes swept across the assembled delegates, finally settling on the lone human representative. Commander Sarah Chen sat calmly in her simple gray uniform, a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by the other delegates. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her hands rested peacefully on the table despite the hostile atmosphere surrounding her. The other species had learned to fear humans over the past decade, but looking at Chen, it was hard to understand why. "The hegemony worlds are under siege," General Vexthan announced, his translator rendering his harsh clicks into standard galactic speech. "The Void Swarm has consumed 17 colonies in the past month. Our fleets are scattered, our defense is crumbling. We need every available ship, every warrior, every weapon." His gaze fixed on Chen with obvious disdain. "Yet Earth sends only one ship, one pathetic vessel with a crew of merely 200 humans." The other delegates murmured agreement. The Zephyrian ambassador, her blue skin shimmering with anxiety, leaned forward. "The humans have always been different in their military approach. Perhaps they do not understand the magnitude of this threat." Chen remained silent, her expression unchanged. She had been briefed extensively before this meeting, and she knew exactly what was coming next. "Where are your reinforcements?" demanded the Krill representative, his crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into angry rainbows. "Where are your battle fleets? Your dreadnoughts? Your carrier groups? The Void Swarm has already consumed 3 of our core worlds. We need real military might, not symbolic gestures." General Vexthan stood, his massive form casting shadows across the table. "Human, your species has developed quite a reputation for warfare. Your history is filled with nothing but conflict and violence. Yet when we face extinction, you send us a single ship." He slammed one of his 4 fists on the table, causing the crystal surface to ring like a bell. "This is insulting. Where is your backup? Where are your reserves?" The chamber fell silent except for the soft hum of the ship's life support systems. Every eye in the room was fixed on Commander Chen, waiting for her response. Some delegates showed curiosity, others skepticism, and a few barely concealed hostility. The human reputation for unpredictability was well known throughout the galaxy, but this seemed like simple arrogance. Chen slowly stood, her movements deliberate and calm. She was shorter than most of the other delegates, barely reaching General Vexthan's shoulder, yet something in her posture commanded attention. "General Vexthan," she said, her voice clear and steady, "you asked where our backup is." The general's mandibles clicked impatiently. "Yes, human. We require immediate reinforcement. The Void Swarm grows stronger with each world they consume. Our intelligence indicates they will reach the hegemony capital within 6 months if we cannot stop them. One ship, no matter how advanced, cannot turn the tide of this war." Chen nodded thoughtfully as if considering his words carefully. Around the table, the other delegates exchanged glances. The Mantari delegate, a insectoid being with gossamer wings, whispered something to her neighbor. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a blade. "I understand your concern," Chen continued, clasping her hands behind her back. "The Void Swarm is indeed a formidable enemy. They have consumed entire star systems, turning living worlds into barren husks. Their bioships adapt to every weapon we throw at them, growing stronger with each victory." She paused, letting her words sink in. "You want to know where humanity's backup is?" "Yes," General Vexthan roared, his patience finally snapping. "Your species conquered your own homeworld through constant warfare. You have weapons that make other civilizations tremble, yet you send us nothing but empty promises and a single vessel. Is this some human joke? Some elaborate insult?" The other delegates began murmuring among themselves, some nodding in agreement with the general's frustration. The situation was becoming heated, and several species were known to resort to violence when diplomacy failed. Chen smiled then, a simple expression that somehow managed to be both reassuring and slightly unsettling. "General, I think there's been a misunderstanding about the nature of human military doctrine." She walked slowly around the table, her boots clicking softly on the metal deck plating. Every delegate tracked her movement, uncertain what to expect from the unpredictable human. You see, when humans go to war, we don't just send our military. We don't just deploy our fleets and armies and call it a day. General Vexthon's compound eyes followed her movement. Then what do you send, human? What could possibly be more effective than your vaunted war machines? Chen stopped directly across from the general, her brown eyes meeting his alien gaze without flinching. The chamber was so quiet that the soft whisper of air through the ventilation system seemed loud as thunder. You asked where our backup is, she said, her voice carrying a note of something the universal translators couldn't quite capture. General Vexthon, you're looking at it. I am the backup. Every human is the backup. When humanity goes to war, we don't send an army to do the fighting while the rest stay home safe. Her smile grew slightly wider. We become the army. The general's mandibles stopped clicking. Several delegates leaned forward, sensing that something important was about to be revealed. The weight of Chen's words hung in the air like a promise of storm clouds gathering on the horizon. General Vexthon's compound eyes narrowed as he processed Commander Chen's words. The other delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure whether the human was being profound or simply cryptic. The Zephyrian ambassador's skin had shifted from blue to a worried purple, while the Krill representative's crystalline form had dimmed noticeably. Explain yourself. Human, the general demanded, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. We need concrete military assets, not philosophical riddles. The Void Swarm doesn't care about your human mysticism. Chen moved to the chamber's large viewport, where stars wheeled slowly past as the flagship maintained its position at the edge of the Kepler 442 system. Tell me, General, what do you know about human history? Enough, Vexthon replied curtly. Your species spent millennia killing each other over resources, territory, and ideology. You nearly destroyed your own planet multiple times. This is why many of us assumed you would be valuable allies against the swarm. And what did we learn from all that warfare? Chen asked, not turning from the viewport. Her reflection in the transparent aluminum showed a figure that seemed almost relaxed despite the tension in the room. The Mantari delegate spoke up, her voice like wind through crystal chimes. That war is destructive and should be avoided. Chen finally turned back to face the assembled delegates, and something in her expression made several of them lean back in their chairs. No, we learned how to fight anything, anywhere with whatever we had available. We learned that survival isn't about having the biggest army or the most advanced weapons. It's about adaptability, resourcefulness, and the willingness to do whatever it takes to protect what matters. She walked back to the table, but instead of sitting, she placed her hands flat on the crystal surface. Every human colony that was evacuated ahead of the swarm, they didn't just run, they left behind surprises. Every refugee ship that fled to safer systems, they carried detailed intelligence on swarm tactics and weaknesses. Every human merchant vessel that passed through contested space, they've been mapping swarm movements and feeding data back to our strategists. General Vexthon's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Intelligence gathering is useful, but it won't stop the swarm from consuming more worlds. You're right, Chen agreed. Which is why we didn't stop there. Do you know what happened to the human colonies that refused evacuation? The chamber fell silent. Several species had assumed those populations had simply been consumed like all the others who couldn't escape in time. They fought, Chen continued, but not the way you might think. They didn't build bigger walls or deploy more soldiers. They became the weapons. Every human civilian learned to build improvised explosives from household chemicals. Every teacher became a saboteur. Every doctor learned how to create biological agents that specifically target swarm organisms. The Zephyrian ambassador's skin had now shifted to a pale white. You turned your entire population into terrorists? We turned our entire population into survivors, Chen corrected. When the swarm reached New Tokyo, they found a city of 12 million people ready to make their occupation as costly as possible. Every building was rigged to collapse. Every water system was poisoned with compounds toxic to swarm biology. Every human carried weapons hidden in places the swarm would never think to look. She began walking around the table again, and this time several delegates unconsciously moved away from her path. The swarm took New Tokyo, but it cost them 18 bioships and set their invasion schedule back by 3 months. And that was just one city. The Krill representative's crystalline form had shifted to a dark amber color. How many colonies followed this strategy? All of them, Chen replied simply. Every human world that fell to the swarm became a nightmare for their occupation forces. We don't just evacuate and write off our losses. We make sure that every victory costs the enemy more than they can afford to lose. General Vexthon stood slowly, his forearms working independently as he processed this information. You're describing a strategy of acceptable losses, sacrificing your own people to slow down the enemy. Chen's expression hardened. I'm describing a strategy of unacceptable costs. Every human who dies fighting the swarm takes a piece of their fleet with them. Every colony they consume teaches us something new about their biology, their tactics, their weaknesses. And every lesson learned gets transmitted to every other human in the galaxy. She moved to a wall display and activated it with a gesture. Star charts appeared, showing the current positions of swarm fleets and the territories they had consumed. Red markers indicated fallen worlds, while yellow markers showed current battle zones. You want to know where our backup is? Chen asked, pointing to the display. Look at these engagement patterns. Notice how swarm advance rates have been decreasing with each system they take? Notice how their bioships are requiring more and more resources to maintain their effectiveness? The delegates leaned forward to study the charts. The pattern was subtle but unmistakable. The swarm's momentum was definitely slowing. That's because every human they've encountered has cost them something, Chen explained. Our backup isn't sitting in some hidden fleet waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Our backup is already deployed. It's been fighting this war from the moment it started, and it's been winning through attrition. The Mentari delegates' wings buzzed nervously. But surely you've lost millions of people using these tactics. Yes, Chen admitted without flinching. We have, and every one of those deaths hurt us deeply. But here's what you need to understand about humans. We don't just mourn our dead. We honor them by making their sacrifice count for something. She turned back to General Vexthon, and the alien commander found himself meeting her gaze despite his instinctive desire to look away. You asked where our backup is, General. The truth is, you've been looking at human backup for months without realizing it. Every delay in the swarm's advance, every unexpected casualty in their ranks, every tactical adaptation they've been forced to make, that's all been human backup in action. The general's mandibles had stopped clicking entirely. Around the table, delegates from 12 different species sat in stunned silence as they began to understand what the human was telling them. The silence in the diplomatic chamber stretched for long minutes as the assembled delegates absorbed Commander Chen's revelation. The star charts continued to rotate slowly on the wall display, each red marker representing a fallen world, now taking on new meaning in their minds. The Trilaxian delegate, a tall being with silver skin and no visible features except for 2 dark eye slits, finally broke the silence. You speak of sacrifice and attrition, but the swarm continues to advance. They have consumed 47 worlds in the past year alone. How is this a victory? Chen nodded, acknowledging the question. Because 47 consumed worlds was supposed to be 200 consumed worlds. The swarm's original projections, based on their previous conquests, indicated they would have reached the galactic core by now. Instead, they're still fighting in the outer rim territories. She manipulated the display, showing projected invasion routes overlaid with actual swarm movements. The difference was striking. Where the projected path showed swift, direct advances, the actual routes were meandering, inefficient, full of costly detours and backtracking. Every human colony that fell according to plan actually didn't fall according to plan, Chen explained. Take the Kepler 438 system. The swarm expected to consume it in 3 days and use it as a staging ground for the next phase of their advance. Instead, they spent 6 weeks there, lost 11 bioships to hidden nuclear devices, and had to completely reshape their fleet organization because our resistance tactics kept targeting their command structures. General Vexthon's forearms moved restlessly as he studied the data. Even if this is true, you're still losing worlds. Your people are still dying. This cannot be sustainable indefinitely. You're absolutely right, Chen agreed, surprising everyone in the room. Which brings us to the second part of human backup strategy. Tell me, General, what do you know about human reproduction rates? The question seemed to come from nowhere, and several delegates exchanged confused glances. The Zephyrian ambassador, her skin now cycling through various shades of bewilderment, spoke first. I don't understand the relevance. Human reproduction is fairly standard for a carbon-based species, perhaps slightly faster than average, but nothing remarkable. Chen smiled, and this time her expression carried a hint of something that made the assembled aliens distinctly uncomfortable. That's peacetime reproduction rates. But humans have a peculiar trait that most other species don't share. When we face extinction, We don't become more conservative with our resources. We become more aggressive about ensuring our survival. She pulled up new data on the display, showing population statistics from human colonies and ships. Every refugee fleet that evacuated ahead of the swarm has seen birth rates increase by an average of 300%. Every human colony that survived swarm attacks has experienced baby booms that would be considered impossible under normal circumstances. The numbers were staggering. The Mantari delegates' wings buzzed in agitation. That's not possible. No species can sustain such reproduction rates without depleting their resources. Most species can't, Chen acknowledged. But humans have another peculiar trait. We're exceptionally good at making more out of less. Every refugee ship isn't just carrying survivors. They're carrying mobile industrial facilities, genetic laboratories, educational systems, and complete technological databases. We're not just fleeing from the swarm. We're expanding faster than they can consume us. She gestured to another section of the display, showing the locations of human settlements throughout the galaxy. Instead of the shrinking presence that everyone expected, the map showed an explosive growth in human populations across hundreds of systems. While the swarm has been focused on consuming our established colonies, we've been establishing new ones in systems they haven't even discovered yet. Every month they spend fighting our rearguard actions is a month where 10 new human colonies become self-sufficient. Every year they waste on our resistance is a year where our population grows by millions. The krill representative's crystalline form had shifted to a deep red color. You're describing a strategy of breeding faster than you can be killed? I'm describing a strategy of adaptation and growth under pressure, Chen corrected. But that's still just the foundation. The real backup is what we're becoming in the process. She changed the display again, this time showing technological development curves. The graphs showed accelerating advancement in multiple fields, with breakthrough discoveries happening at an unprecedented rate. Humans have always been at our best when we're fighting for survival, Chen explained. Every challenge the swarm presents us with becomes a problem that millions of human minds work on simultaneously. Every new bioweapon they deploy gets countered within weeks. Every tactical innovation they develop gets turned against them within months. General Vexthon leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued despite his earlier skepticism. Show me examples. Chen brought up technical specifications that made several delegates gasp. The swarm's bioships use a carbon-silicon hybrid structure that was supposedly impossible to replicate. Human engineers cracked it in 8 months and improved on it. Their adaptive armor changes molecular structure in response to weapons fire. Our weapons now change their damage types faster than their armor can adapt. More data flowed across the display. Energy weapons that learned from each shot. Defensive systems that evolved in real time. Ship designs that incorporated the best features of swarm biotechnology, while adding distinctly human innovations. But the most important advancement isn't technological, Chen continued. It's psychological. Every human who survives contact with the swarm comes back changed. They're not traumatized victims. They're angry, motivated, and absolutely determined to make sure this never happens to anyone else. She turned back to face the assembled delegates, and something in her expression made them all lean back slightly. General Vexathon, you wanted to know where our backup is. I'll tell you exactly where it is. Our backup is in every human child being born in the evacuation fleets, raised from birth to fight this war. Our backup is in every human scientist working 18-hour days to develop new weapons and defenses. Our backup is in every human engineer who looks at swarm technology and asks not, how do we stop it, but how do we make it better? The chamber had grown very quiet again. Outside the viewport, stars continued their ancient dance, but inside, 12 different species were beginning to understand that they might have seriously underestimated what it meant to be human. General Vexthon stood motionless for several heartbeats, his compound eyes processing the implications of what Commander Chen had just revealed. Around the table, the other delegates seemed equally stunned. The Trilaxian delegate's featureless face somehow managed to convey deep concern, while the Zephyrian ambassador's skin had settled into a pale green that indicated profound unease. You speak of your species as if it were transforming into something else entirely, the general finally said, his voice lacking its earlier aggressive tone. Are you suggesting that humanity is evolving in response to this conflict? Chen moved back to the viewport, her reflection now seeming more substantial against the starfield. Evolution is a slow process, General. What we're experiencing is more like awakening. For most of human history, we've been fighting each other. Our wars have been limited by geography, resources, and the simple fact that we were all the same species with similar capabilities. She turned back to face them, and several delegates noticed that her posture had subtly changed. Where before she had seemed calm and diplomatic, now she appeared coiled, ready for action. The swarm changed that. For the first time in human history, we're facing an enemy that threatens every human everywhere. We're not fighting for territory or ideology or resources. We're fighting for the right to exist. The Mantari delegate's wings had folded tightly against her back, a sign of extreme discomfort. You make it sound as if your entire species has become militarized. Not militarized, Chen corrected. Weaponized. There's a difference. A military is an organization separate from civilian life. What we've become is something where every civilian is a potential weapon, every resource is a potential advantage, and every setback is a learning opportunity. She activated the display again, showing footage from human colonies under swarm attack. The images were disturbing, but not in the way the delegates expected. Instead of panic and chaos, they saw organized resistance. Children as young as 10 were efficiently operating evacuation procedures, while adults calmly prepared defensive positions. There was no hysteria, no breakdown of social order. This footage is from New Geneva, taken during the swarm's assault 3 months ago, Chen explained. Notice the response patterns. No one is running in panic. No one is paralyzed by fear. Every human in that colony knew exactly what to do because they'd been preparing for this moment their entire lives. The footage showed human defenders using weapons that seemed to be constructed from everyday materials. Kitchen utensils had been converted into electromagnetic pulse devices. Agricultural equipment had been modified into kinetic accelerators. Even children's toys had been repurposed into sophisticated surveillance drones. Your people fight with improvised weapons, observed the Krill representative, his crystalline form now showing flashes of orange concern. This suggests desperation, not strength. Chen's smile returned, and this time it was definitely unsettling. General Vexthan, may I ask you a question about Kethtar military doctrine? The general's mandibles clicked uncertainly, but he nodded. If you were forced to fight with improvised weapons, how effective would you be? Not very, the general admitted. Kethtar warriors are trained with specific equipment. Without our plasma rifles and force shields, we would be significantly disadvantaged. Exactly, Chen said. Most species develop military technology and then train their forces to use it. Humans do the opposite. We train our people to fight with anything available, then we give them better tools if we can. A human with a kitchen knife is still dangerous. A human with a plasma rifle is terrifying. She brought up new footage, this time showing post-battle scenes. Human defenders were efficiently stripping useful components from destroyed swarm bioships, incorporating the materials into their own equipment within hours of the battle's end. But improvisation is just the beginning, Chen continued. What makes humans truly dangerous is our ability to learn from every encounter. Watch this. The display showed tactical analyses from successive swarm attacks on human positions. Each engagement showed subtle but significant improvements in human defensive strategies. Weapons became more effective, coordination became more precise, and casualty rates steadily decreased despite facing increasingly sophisticated swarm forces. Every human who survives a swarm encounter becomes a teacher for others who haven't faced them yet, Chen explained. Every successful defense gets analyzed, replicated, and improved upon. Every failure gets studied until we understand exactly why it happened and how to prevent it next time. The Trilaxian delegate finally spoke again. This level of adaptability is impressive, but the swarm also learns from each encounter. How do you maintain an advantage? Chen's expression grew more serious. Because the swarm learns as a collective entity, they process information and adapt their strategies as a unified organism. Humans learn as individuals first, then share that knowledge with the group. This means we can adapt faster and in more diverse ways than a single collective intelligence can counter. She manipulated the display to show communication networks spanning the galaxy. Thousands of nodes pulsed with activity, representing human colonies, ships, and outposts sharing information in real time. Every human engagement with the swarm generates data that gets transmitted instantly to every other human in the galaxy. A new swarm tactic discovered. in the outer rim systems is being countered. In the core worlds before the swarm even, realizes their advantage has been lost. General Vexthon's forearms were now moving in complex patterns, a sign of deep thought among his species. You're describing a level of coordination that rivals the swarm's own collective consciousness. Better than their collective consciousness, Chen corrected. The swarm thinks as one mind with many bodies. Humans think as many minds that choose to work together. We can coordinate when it's useful and act independently when it's more effective. We can maintain unified strategies while still encouraging individual innovation. The implications were staggering. The assembled delegates began to realize they weren't just looking at a different military strategy. They were witnessing the emergence of an entirely new kind of civilization, one forged in the crucible of an existential war against an implacable enemy. So when you say I am the backup, General Vexthon said slowly, you mean that every human has become a weapon, a factory, a laboratory, a teacher, and a student all at once, Chen finished. Every human is backup for every other human, and collectively, we're all backup for any species willing to stand with us against the swarm. The chamber fell silent again as the true meaning of her words sank in. The atmosphere in the diplomatic chamber had shifted dramatically. What had begun as a confrontational meeting about military inadequacy had transformed into something approaching awe and terror. General Vexthon found himself studying Commander Chen with new eyes, seeing not just a human representative but a living example of what her species had become. Commander Chen, the Zephyrian ambassador said, her skin now a deep purple that indicated profound concern. What you're describing sounds almost inhuman. Have you considered the cost of this transformation? What have you lost in becoming these living weapons? Chen was quiet for a moment, and for the first time since the meeting began, something vulnerable flickered across her expression. That's a fair question, Ambassador. And you're right that we've lost things. We've lost the luxury of innocence. We've lost the ability to ignore threats until they become crises. We've lost the comfort of believing that someone else will handle the big problems. She walked back to the table, but this time she sat down, making herself less imposing. But we've gained something too. We've gained the certainty that we'll never be helpless again. Every human child born since the swarm war began will grow up knowing they have the skills and knowledge to protect themselves and others. They'll never experience the horror of watching their world burn while waiting for someone else to save them. The Mantari delegate's wings fluttered nervously, but surely there must be psychological costs. The level of constant preparation you describe would drive most species to madness. Perhaps, Chen acknowledged, but humans have always thrived under pressure. We've never been particularly good at peaceful prosperity. We get complacent, we start fighting among ourselves, we stagnate. The swarm war has given us something we've needed for centuries, a clear purpose and a worthy enemy. She gestured to the star charts still displayed on the wall. Before the swarm, human colonies were scattered and isolated. We had dozens of different governments, conflicting ideologies, competing interests. We spent more energy arguing with each other than we did advancing as a species. Now, for the first time in human history, we're truly united. General Vexthon leaned forward, his mandibles clicking thoughtfully. You speak as if this war has been beneficial for humanity. In many ways it has been, Chen admitted, and her honesty clearly disturbed several delegates. Don't misunderstand me. The deaths, the destroyed worlds, the suffering, all of that is a tragedy. But humans have always been shaped by adversity. We've never advanced as quickly as when we were facing extinction. She brought up new displays showing technological progress charts. The curves were steep, showing advancement rates that seemed impossible. In the 3 years since the swarm war began, humans have made technological leaps that would normally take decades. We've solved problems that have puzzled us for generations. We've broken through barriers that seemed insurmountable. The krill representative's crystalline form had deepened to a dark amber. These advancement rates are beyond what any species should be capable of achieving. How is this possible? Because we stopped wasting time on non-essential research, Chen explained. Before the war, human scientists worked on thousands of different projects, many of them purely theoretical. Now every research initiative has a direct connection to survival. Every breakthrough gets immediately tested in real-world conditions. Every failure gets analyzed and improved upon within days instead of years. She showed them examples. Energy weapons that had gone from concept to battlefield deployment in 6 months. Ship designs that incorporated revolutionary propulsion systems developed under desperate time constraints, medical technologies that could regenerate tissue damage from swarm bioweapons. But the real breakthrough isn't technological, Chen continued. It's social. For the first time, every human understands that their individual actions have consequences for the entire species. Personal ambition has been replaced by collective survival instinct. Political divisions have been set aside in favor of practical cooperation. The Trilaxian delegate's voice carried a note of something approaching fear. You're describing the emergence of a species-wide hive mind. No, Chen said firmly. A hive mind sacrifices individual identity for collective efficiency. What we've developed is more like a voluntary coordination network. Every human maintains their individual personality, creativity, and judgment. But we've all agreed to prioritize species survival above personal interests. She stood again, moving to a different section of the display. Let me show you what this looks like in practice. This is data from the defense of the Proxima Centauri system last month. The display showed a real-time recreation of the battle. Swarm bioships had emerged from hyperspace to find what appeared to be a lightly defended system, with only a few human vessels present. But as the battle progressed, the situation revealed itself to be far more complex. The swarm detected 3 human destroyers and assumed they were facing a token resistance, Chen narrated. What they didn't realize was that every human civilian ship in the system had been quietly modified for combat. Every mining vessel carried nuclear charges. Every transport ship had been equipped with military-grade weapons. Every scientific research station had been converted into a fortress. The recreation showed the moment when the trap was sprung. Dozens of apparently civilian vessels suddenly revealed hidden weapon systems. Space platforms that appeared to be simple communication relays opened up with devastating firepower. Even escape pods turned out to be disguised missile clusters. The swarm brought 47 bioships to consume a system they thought contained maybe 1,000 humans, Chen continued. They found themselves facing a coordinated defense by 12,000 humans, all working together with precision that rivals any military force in the galaxy. The battle was brutal but decisive. The swarm forces were systematically destroyed, with human casualties numbering less than 200. Every civilian in that system had been trained for this moment, Chen explained. Every ship captain knew exactly what role they would play. Every station commander understood their part in the defensive plan. They didn't need complex command structures or detailed orders. They just needed the signal to begin. General Vexthon's compound eyes were fixed on the display. This level of coordination would require years of planning and training. It did, Chen agreed. Every human colony now maintains defense plans that assume every person and every resource will be needed. Children learn tactical planning alongside basic mathematics. Adults practice emergency procedures the way other species practice cultural rituals. We've made survival skills as fundamental to human education as language and literacy. The implications were staggering. The delegates were beginning to understand that they weren't just looking at a military alliance with humanity. They were potentially allying themselves with a species that had fundamentally transformed itself into something unprecedented in galactic history. The silence that followed Commander Chen's revelation was different from the earlier pauses in the conversation. This was not the quiet of confusion or skepticism, but the heavy silence of beings processing information that challenged their fundamental understanding of what was possible. The Zephyrian ambassador was the first to speak, her skin now cycling through rapid color changes that indicated severe distress. Commander, what you're describing is the militarization of an entire species. Every human, from child to elder, has become a potential combatant. This is unprecedented in galactic history. Chen nodded solemnly. You're absolutely right, Ambassador. It is unprecedented, but so is the swarm. They don't distinguish between military and civilian targets. They consume everything living. When facing an enemy like that, the distinction between soldier and civilian becomes meaningless. General Vexthon had been studying the battle data from Proxima Centauri, his forearms manipulating the display controls to examine different aspects of the engagement. Commander Chen, this coordination you've achieved, it's remarkable, but it raises troubling questions. What happens when the swarm war ends? What becomes of a species that has transformed every member into a weapon? It was a question that Chen had clearly anticipated, and her response was immediate. General, you're assuming the war will end with the defeat of the swarm. What if it doesn't? What if the swarm is just the first of many existential threats we'll face? The galaxy is vast and we've barely explored 1% of it. Who knows what other hostile forces might be out there? She manipulated the display to show a map of known space, with vast regions marked as unexplored. The swarm came from beyond our mapped territories. They appeared without warning and immediately began consuming everything in their path. If we go back to being a scattered, unprepared species after defeating them, what happens when the next threat emerges? The Mentari delegate's wings had been folded tightly against her back, but now they spread slightly in a gesture of grudging acceptance. You're suggesting that humanity has permanently changed in response to this crisis. Not just permanently changed, Chen corrected. Permanently improved. The humans you're looking at now aren't a temporary military response to an emergency. This is what we're becoming as a species. More capable, more coordinated, more resilient. She brought up new data showing human expansion patterns since the beginning of the Swarm War. Instead of the random, scattered colonization efforts of the past, human settlements now showed clear strategic planning. Colonies were positioned to support each other. Communication networks were redundant and heavily protected, and resource distribution followed patterns that maximized collective survival chances. We're not just fighting the swarm, Chen explained. We're building the foundation for humanity's future in a dangerous galaxy. Every lesson we learn, every adaptation we make, every improvement in our coordination and capabilities becomes part of our permanent cultural evolution. The krill representative's crystalline form had shifted to a deep red color that indicated alarm. Commander, what you're describing sounds like preparation for galactic conquest. A species with the capabilities you've outlined could potentially threaten every other civilization in known space. Chen's expression grew serious, and she looked directly at each delegate in turn. That's a valid concern, and I won't insult your intelligence by dismissing it. Yes, the capabilities we're developing could theoretically be used for conquest. But consider this. If humans were interested in galactic domination, would we be here asking for alliance with your species? Would we be sharing our strategic insights and tactical innovations with potential rivals? She gestured to the chamber around them. The fact that I'm here, explaining our capabilities instead of hiding them, should tell you something about human intentions. We could have continued to let you believe we were weak and unprepared. We could have allowed you to underestimate us while we secretly built our strength. Instead, we're being completely transparent about what we've become. General Vexthan's mandibles clicked in a pattern that indicated deep consideration. Why? Why reveal these capabilities when you could have maintained the element of surprise? Because we need allies, not subjects, Chen replied immediately. The swarm taught us that even humans have limits. We can adapt and improve and coordinate, but we can't be everywhere at once. We can't defend every world simultaneously. We can't research every possible solution to every potential threat. She activated a new section of the display, showing projected swarm expansion routes. Our intelligence indicates that the swarm has identified several key strategic targets for their next major offensive. They're planning to strike simultaneously at 3 different sectors, spreading their forces to prevent coordinated resistance. The tactical situation was sobering. Even with their improved capabilities, human forces would be stretched thin trying to defend multiple fronts simultaneously. This is where we need you, Chen continued, addressing the assembled delegates directly. Not as subordinates or cannon fodder, but as genuine partners. Your species have capabilities and knowledge that complement ours. The Kethtar have the most advanced shield technology in the galaxy. The Zephyrians have unmatched expertise in biosciences. The Mentari have communication networks that span dimensions. She gestured to each delegate as she spoke. We could try to develop these capabilities ourselves, but it would take time we don't have. Working together, we can create a combined defense that's stronger than anything any of our species could achieve alone. The Trilaxian delegate leaned forward slightly. You're proposing a true military alliance, not just human protection for our worlds. I'm proposing something more than that, Chen said. I'm proposing that we share everything. Our strategic innovations, our tactical developments, our technological breakthroughs. We help you adapt your military doctrines to be more effective against the swarm, and you help us understand aspects of warfare that we haven't encountered before. The offer was staggering in its scope. Most military alliances involved limited cooperation and carefully guarded secrets. Chen was suggesting complete transparency and shared development. What you're proposing could fundamentally change how all our species approach military planning, observed the Zephyrian ambassador, her skin now showing the rapid blue-green patterns that indicated intense calculation. Yes, Chen agreed. Just like the swarm has fundamentally changed how humans approach everything. The old ways of thinking about warfare, about technology, about cooperation between species, all of that becomes obsolete when you're facing extinction. She turned back to General Vexthon, meeting his compound gaze directly. So, General, you asked where our backup is. Now you know. Our backup is every human in the galaxy, working together with unprecedented coordination and capability. The question now is, do you want that backup fighting alongside your forces, or do you want to face the swarm with conventional military thinking that has already proven inadequate? The challenge was clear, and every delegate in the chamber understood that they were being offered a choice that would define the future of their species. General Vexthon stood motionless for what felt like an eternity, his compound eyes reflecting the star charts that still glowed on the chamber's display. The other delegates watched him with varying degrees of tension, understanding that his decision would likely influence their own responses to Commander Chen's unprecedented offer. Finally, the general's mandibles began clicking in the rapid pattern that indicated a major decision being reached. "Commander Chen," he said, his voice carrying new weight, 3 hours ago I was prepared to dismiss humanity as inadequate allies. I believed your species was either unwilling or unable to provide meaningful assistance against the swarm. He turned to face her directly, and something in his posture had fundamentally changed. Where before he had been dismissive and aggressive, now he showed the careful attention of a predator recognizing another apex hunter. "I was wrong," he continued, "not just about your military capabilities, but about the nature of this war itself. You're right that conventional military thinking has proven inadequate. My own forces have been fighting the swarm for 18 months, and our best achievements have been strategic withdrawals and costly defensive victories." The admission clearly cost him something. Kethtar culture valued military prowess above almost everything else, and acknowledging failure was not done lightly. "But what concerns me now is different from what concerned me when this meeting began," General Vexthon continued. 3 hours ago I was worried that humans were too weak to be useful allies. Now I'm wondering if you've become too dangerous to be trusted allies. The chamber tensed again, but Chen's expression remained calm. "Explain." "You've described a species that has weaponized every aspect of its existence," the general said. "Every human is now a potential combatant. Every human colony is now a fortress. Every human civilian is now trained in warfare. This level of militarization has never been seen in galactic history. How do we know that when the swarm is defeated, you won't turn these capabilities against the rest of us?" It was the question that every delegate had been thinking, but none had been brave enough to ask directly. Chen nodded, showing that she understood and respected the concern. "General, let me answer that question with another question," she said. "How many human colonies have been established since the swarm war began?" "According to our intelligence, approximately 400, the general replied. "And how many of those colonies have been built on worlds that were previously claimed by other species?" The general paused, clearly not expecting that direction. "None. All human expansion has been into unclaimed systems or systems voluntarily shared with your species." "Exactly," Chen said. "Despite developing the capabilities to take whatever we wanted, humans have continued to respect the territorial claims and sovereignty of other species. Despite becoming more powerful than we've ever been, we've become less aggressive toward our neighbors, not more." She manipulated the display to show comparative data from before and after the swarm war began. Human conflicts with other species have actually decreased by 90% since the war started. Trade disputes, border conflicts, resource competitions, all of these have virtually disappeared. The Zephyrian ambassador's skin had shifted to a thoughtful blue-gray. "Because you've been focused on the swarm threat." "Partly," Chen agreed. "But also because we've finally learned the difference between real threats and manufactured conflicts. When you're facing genuine extinction, you stop wasting energy on trivial disputes." She turned to address all the delegates simultaneously. "Before the swarm war, humans fought each other constantly because we were bored, frustrated, and looking for something to prove. We had no worthy enemies, so we made enemies of each other. Now we have a worthy enemy, and suddenly our disputes with other humans seem pointless. The Mantari delegate's wings fluttered in what might have been understanding. You're suggesting that the swarm has given humanity a constructive outlet for its aggressive tendencies. More than that, Chen said. The swarm has taught us what real threats look like. After facing an enemy that wants to consume every living thing in the galaxy, it's hard to get excited about trade route disputes or mineral rights disagreements. She brought up new data, showing human diplomatic activity since the war began. The patterns were striking. While military capabilities had expanded dramatically, diplomatic conflicts had nearly vanished. The species you need to worry about, Chen continued, are the ones that develop massive military capabilities during peacetime. When they have no external threats to focus on, those are the species that start looking for conquest to justify their military spending. Humans have developed these capabilities in response to a genuine existential threat. When that threat is gone, we'll still have the capabilities, but we'll also have the perspective that comes from facing real extinction. General Vexthan's forearms moved in complex patterns as he processed this argument. You're asking us to trust that this perspective will be permanent. I'm asking you to look at the evidence, Chen replied. Every human who has faced the swarm comes back changed, not traumatized or broken, but fundamentally altered in their understanding of what matters. They stop caring about petty human rivalries. They stop being interested in individual glory or advancement. They become focused on collective survival and improvement. She paused, her expression growing more serious. General, the humans you'll be working with aren't the same species that was scattered and quarrelsome before the war. We've become something new, something that understands the value of cooperation and the cost of real conflict. The Trilaxian delegate finally spoke again. Commander, what guarantee can you offer that this transformation is permanent? What happens to human aggression when there are no more existential threats to channel it toward? Chen smiled, and this time her expression held genuine warmth instead of the earlier unsettling confidence. That's the beautiful thing about human psychology. We don't lose our aggression, we redirect it. When we're not fighting external enemies, we fight internal problems. Disease, poverty, ignorance, inefficiency. There's always something that needs conquering. She brought up historical data showing human behavior patterns during peacetime. Before the Swarm War, humans spent enormous amounts of energy competing with each other because we were restless and needed challenges. After the war, that same energy will be directed toward solving problems and improving conditions for everyone. You mean you'll turn your military capabilities toward civilian applications? The Krill representative observed, his crystalline form now showing flashes of cautious optimism. Exactly, Chen confirmed. All the coordination skills we've developed for warfare will be applied to scientific research, exploration, and development. All the rapid adaptation techniques we've learned for survival will be used to solve technological and social problems. All the resource management capabilities we've built for military logistics will be directed toward improving living conditions throughout human space. She gestured to the display one final time. General Vexthan, you asked where our backup is. I've shown you that our backup is every human, working together with unprecedented capability and coordination. But here's what I haven't told you yet. Our backup is also every species that chooses to work with us. Because once this war is over, we're going to need new challenges to keep us occupied. And the biggest challenge I can imagine is building a galactic civilization where every species can thrive safely. The general looked around the chamber at his fellow delegates, seeing varying degrees of consideration, concern, and cautious hope. When he turned back to Chen, his decision was evident in his posture. Commander Chen, he said formally, the hegemony accepts your proposal for complete military alliance. We will share our shield technology and tactical knowledge. In return, we request full access to human strategic innovations and coordination techniques. One by one, the other delegates added their agreements. The Zephyrians offered their bioscience expertise. The Mantari pledged their communication networks. The Krill promised their industrial capabilities. As the meeting concluded and the delegates began filing out to contact their respective governments, General Vexthan remained behind. When the chamber was empty except for him and Chen, he spoke quietly. Commander, I hope you're right about what humanity will become after this war. Chen nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility in his words. So do I, General. But I can promise you this. Whatever we become, we won't forget the species that stood with us when extinction was at our doorstep. As General Vexthan left the chamber, Chen remained at the viewport, watching the stars wheel slowly past. In the distance, she could see the lights of other ships, human vessels, alien vessels, all now part of something unprecedented in galactic history. The backup had been activated. Now they just had to prove worthy of the trust that had been placed in them.